Well, Paul, I have introduced you in all the emails as Larry and Ann's son-in-law and Suzanne's husband.
That sums it up pretty much.
And Evie and Margot's dad.
Right.
Oh yeah, that too.
That too. But we're grateful for your willingness to take the time to share with us some about COVID and about the vaccinations. For the rest of you on the call, some people sent me questions and I've sent those to Paul. I think he probably already knew that these were the questions on most people's minds. And what I do with on Sunday mornings is once I turn it to Paul, I'll go through and make sure everybody is muted. So if you want to ask Paul a question, you need to unmute.
I'd like to say something real quick, Ben.
Okay, Ben.
Royce and I have a lady that worked with us, and she had skin cancer on her calf. And they operated, it never healed up. They were ready to amputate her leg. And she got a referral from someone right here that saved her leg. And I am so appreciative, Paul. Thank you.
No problem at all. I was very happy to see her, and I think she's doing well now.
She is.
Good.
Okay, Paul, and we're just going to turn to you and let you lead us through this. I'm going to put it on speaker view so I can see you full screen or thereabouts. So
we all need to mute, don't we?
It's all mine, huh? Okay.
Right. We all mute.
All right.
We need to mute, Ben.
Can everybody hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, great. Well, first, thank you for inviting me to speak with you all tonight. I got to do this a week or so ago for West End, and thought it was very productive. Everybody had a lot of really good questions, and I've already looked at some of the ones that were that Vin sent to me, and they're all very good, and I'm sure that we can get into more detail about some of those, some of that in a little bit. So just to kind of summarize where we are in this whole process, this has been about a year in the making as far as vaccination for COVID-19. However, the technology that we have, that we're using for the initial 2 vaccines that we have now, mRNA technology, and I'll explain what that is, has been around and been studied for about a decade. But this is the first time that we've actually used it in a commercially available vaccine. They've looked at mRNA technology for other disorders, other infections, and particularly cancer treatments. But this is the first time we've had it available and used in the public in a vaccine. So the 2 vaccines that we currently have available to us through an FDA emergency use authorization, one is the Pfizer vaccine and the other one is Moderna. Just to summarize the difference in those vaccines, there's not much. They are both mRNA vaccines. They both have a very similar ingredients as far as their makeup. The Pfizer vaccine is a 2-dose shot, same as Moderna. Pfizer is given 21 days apart, Moderna 28 days. As far as how effective they are, Pfizer, their initial phase 3 trial numbers was about 95% effective, and Moderna was pretty close to that, about 94.5%. What does that mean in terms of how effective? What does that 95% mean? It means about 95% of the people who get the vaccine will not get COVID-19, and 5% will. And that's based on a trial with Pfizer that was about 45,000 participants, and in Moderna about 30,000 participants. in terms of which one you should go for when they're all out there, I would say whichever one you can get. There's going to be some differences and some nuances and some things we can discuss about the differences between those two viruses. But ultimately, if you have an opportunity to get one or the other, either one should work very, very well and should be safe. What I'll do, that's kind of just a brief intro. I know we're getting into some more details. What I'll do is I'll start with some of the questions that Vin sent me. And then we can kind of get into a discussion from there. So one of the first questions I got here says, can people who have been vaccinated still transmit the disease to others? And if so, how does this happen? So the short answer is we don't know. The hypothesis or the guess or an educated guess of what might happen after you're vaccinated, one way that you could potentially spread it to somebody else after you've been vaccinated is if you're exposed to the virus, that vaccine could still be, or that virus could still be on your skin, could still live in your throat, your mouth, your nasal passages, and still replicate. So it could still divide and still produce other generations of the virus just on your body. It may not get you sick because you have the vaccine, and the amount of virus that you're shedding may be significantly lower than somebody who is actually infected with the virus and sick with the virus. But the potential for that possibility still exists. We don't know the answer right now. If after you're fully protected, can you give it to somebody else? We do know that about 5% of people that get the vaccine can still get COVID-19. So that's always a possibility. But if the vaccine is effective for you, can you still give it to other people? We don't know yet. So as of right now, what we're recommending is that if you do have the vaccine, you're around others that have not gotten the vaccine, we would still recommend you wear a mask. We would still recommend you wear a mask right now until a larger number of individuals get vaccinated as well, because while it is 95% effective, there are still 5% of people that will catch it. And when you're talking about vaccinating millions of people, 5% still being able to get the virus is not small. So one thing that I know people have asked was, well, what if everybody in the group is vaccinated, and can we still hang out together, in a small number and still have contact with people? Everybody in the family's vaccinated. Can we all hang out? Probably is what I would say. Again, I would put the caveat in there that there is still that 5% chance that you could get sick. However, one good thing that they showed in the trials is that, and I think this addresses a different question that's coming up, is, well, let's say I am one of those 5% of individuals who gets the vaccine and also gets sick. What's my chance of getting really sick? So having severe disease, getting in the hospital, being put on a ventilator. The people that were vaccinated that went on to develop severe disease, not just a mild or moderate infection, but severe disease, 0 in the Pfizer trial and 1 in the Moderna trial. So, you may still get sick, but the chances based on that initial data is significantly reduced of you developing a severe infection and ending up in the ICU on a ventilator. So, that is very promising. Now, obviously, we're going to see more people. That was in a group of 45,000 with the Pfizer trial, 30,000 in the Moderna trial, and that number will go up, but your chances of developing severe infection and ultimately death is significantly reduced with vaccination. Any questions so far about any of that? Any clarifications?
Question. What was
Yes.
the age group of those who tested positive after getting the vaccine? Were they elderly, somewhat like me, or were they all through the whole spectrum?
So the Pfizer trial found about, of the 100 and I think it was 90 people who developed COVID-19 after they were vaccinated, 95% of those did not get the vaccine and 5% did. But the small number of those individuals that got the virus while they were vaccinated in that study, it probably doesn't matter much what those, how old those 10 were or how young. I could get those numbers, and I think most of them were older. But does that mean that it was just a matter of fact that you know, they have less immunity, it was less effective? It's difficult to say. So I don't think we can really draw any conclusions until we get it out there and see it in more people. But the specific age range of those small number of individuals that did get that, I don't have that information, and I'm not sure if it was actually published, but I can find that out and let you know.
Paul, explain briefly the mRNA
Sure.
nature. You
Sure.
said you were going to, but okay.
So mRNA stands for messenger RNA. And that is basically a small piece of genetic material that encodes a protein, a piece of a protein that the virus has on its surface. So the COVID-19 virus has a protein on its surface called the spike protein. It is unique. This particular protein is unique to COVID-19. So what mRNA is a piece of genetic material that is in the shot, it's injected. This genetic material goes into your cells. It uses your body's own chemical makeup, cellular structure to reverse engineer, so to speak, a piece of this spike protein. So your body gets information from the shot and then begins to make a piece of the virus. But it does not give you COVID-19. And the mRNA does not affect or go anywhere near your DNA. And when I say near, I know we're talking about, you know, distances of nano, you know, meters. So, but in terms of genetics, it's very far away. So it does not affect your DNA. It is not incorporated into your DNA in any way. It simply goes into your cells, creates this protein. Then that genetic material is destroyed by your body. The protein goes to the surface of your cells in your body and presents it to your immune system. Your immune system recognizes the piece of this protein as something that doesn't belong there, and it begins to build antibodies and other defenses. And then so when your body actually gets exposed to the real virus, your immune system is already primed and ready and can fight the infection. So that's the general idea behind mRNA. Again, it's been around for a decade. I mean, we've known about what mRNA is for decades, just from research. But as far as using mRNA in treatments, the technology has been studied for a decade, but this is the first time we've used it in a vaccine. Okay.
Paul, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
What about, and I'm Donna Williard, I'm sorry, I know my thing says iPad 3.
Hello, hello iPad 3, yes.
Yeah.
Hi, Donna.
I'm wondering about blood types. I've heard that, is it O positive or O negative could be more fighting off the virus than other blood types. Is there anything to that?
Potentially. I wouldn't hang my hat on feeling that you have any more protection based on your blood type. If I can draw a parallel to another disease, it would be malaria and sickle cell anemia. So in Africa, many people are exposed and are infected with malaria, but in certain areas, they have more of a resistance to developing sickle cell anemia. And they think this has been evolved over time, just from, and then we, in the United States, we have populations that are not as exposed to malaria. So they have this gene, if you have African ancestry, that may make you more likely to develop sickle cell anemia and issues in the States, as opposed to if you're exposed to malaria, as if you lived in Africa. So with regard to that, could certain blood types give you protection against developing COVID-19 or severe COVID-19? It's possible. How can we use that? Or would that change our recommendations at all? No. We would still recommend you get the vaccine. We would still recommend that you wear a mask, you social distance, and wash hands. So I think it's interesting. I think that we'll find out more information on what blood types may be more protected than others. And I think there's something there, but not enough where I would use it to make any treatment decisions or make any recommendations at this time.
Paul,
Yes.
my name is Mary Lee Hampton, and I have a question about getting COVID for a second time. My mother is in a skilled care facility up in Clay County, Tennessee, and one of her friends and my friends, who's in her 80s, had the COVID virus in September or maybe early, but she was out of quarantine, I think, by October. And she had enough of the case that she ended up with pneumonia and some other things, but she did, recover. And on December the 28th, she got her first shot of the vaccine. And I've learned since that it's the Moderna, because it's the 28 days that they take it again. On January the 4th, they test there twice a week because of the high rate in their county. And she tested positive again with no symptoms. So is it possible that she has a true case, or did she get a false positive? Or, I mean, how often does that happen?
So you said her initial infection was around September?
Yes, probably, I would say early to mid-September.
Okay. One possibility, and I think it's less of a possibility, is that she could still be testing positive from her initial illness back in September. We've had some cases where people have tested positive for 2, 3, 4 months, even after their initial infection. Previously, in the early part of the pandemic, when we wanted to decide whether or not we could move somebody out of isolation in the hospital, we wanted to get repeated tests. And so we didn't know as much at the time, but now we think that beyond 10 to 14 days, the risk of you having virus that can infect somebody else is pretty much close to zero. So we don't even retest anybody in the hospital when we need to make a decision about, okay, when can we stop wearing the full mask, glove, and gowns when we go in the room? And it's normally between 10 to 20 days, depending on the case. If it's a more severe illness, we wait 20 days. If it's very mild, we wait 10 days. So it's possible that she could still be positive from her initial infection.
But she had had a negative test before she got the positive.
Okay. And even
with that,
even still, I've seen negative tests that we repeat them after they were negative, and they repeat them again, and we really don't think they got reinfected. We think it was just from that initial infection. Now, her infection being in September may be a little long to still have a positive test. So one of the more likely scenarios is either she is reinfected, or she has a false positive result.
Mhm.
But if the crux of the question is, could she have a new infection? That's very possible.
Right.
We think that natural immunity to an initial infection lasts about 90 days. So 3
Okay.
months from an initial infection, you're probably safe and you're probably not going to get it again. However, beyond that, we think you can, and we do have reports of people getting it again.
But it wouldn't have had anything to do with a vaccine, you don't think?
No,
Okay.
not at all. There's no reason to think at this time. I'm always gonna say at this time, because we always get new data out there, but there's no reason to believe that a positive test should reflect vaccination.
Okay.
Because if it was a blood test looking for antibodies, which isn't a marker of an immunity, of an immune response, then yes, that would be ideal. We want you to have a positive antibody test.
Mhm.
But on the nasal swab, they're looking for active virus. That's what that swab is looking for,
Mhm.
not looking for immunity. So I don't think it has anything to do with the shot. It's
Okay.
either an old infection or she's just got an asymptomatic infection. But that shouldn't keep her from continuing the series either.
Oh, I don't think it will. I know
Yeah,
she had to, they did put her back in quarantine, of course.
Okay.
So,
Sure.
Thank
She
you.
could finish. No problem. She could finish that shot once she gets out of quarantine. That should be enough to go ahead and get the second one.
okay.
Paul, how long will the vaccine last?
We don't know. We don't know. Could last a long time.
Okay.
I hope it lasts longer than 90 days. And I think it will, but we don't know. There's no way to know. I don't even know if there's a way to speculate at this point. I'm sure some of the researchers could. But as far as any of the other infections that we've studied, measles is one great example of a vaccine that will last years. It's 95 to 99% effective. It works very, very well. The flu vaccine is seasonal. Sometimes we have a vaccine that's 50% effective, sometimes better, sometimes worse. So we don't know. And that's why even if somebody has gotten COVID, we're still saying go ahead and get the vaccine series, because the series may be better than actual natural immunity from the infection. And depending on the disease, natural infections sometimes give you better immunity, better protection versus a vaccine, or vice versa. So we just don't know.
What we've heard horror stories about people who had COVID-19 and the lasting effect of it.
Right.
And, what all have you seen as far as people have had it, and what has it done to their body or their taste or the sense of smell, whatever?
Yeah. I can tell you the most severe cases. Some of the milder things, people may have a lingering cough, lingering fatigue for weeks to months, loss of taste or smell that lasts for weeks, potentially months. The biggest symptom, probably the most common symptom, is prolonged fatigue that may go on for weeks to months. However, what do we know as far as the long-term consequences? Are you at risk to develop other types of diseases, other types of infections, bleeding disorders, blood clots down the line? Potentially. Most of the time, people are not going to be affected with any of these long-term effects. But as far as the real severe outcomes are the ones that we see who are in the ICU. So once you're in the ICU and you're on a ventilator, and sometimes you require a machine called ECMO, which is a device that basically bypasses your lungs, oxygenates your blood via a machine, and then pumps it back into your body. When you're at that stage, your lungs aren't really doing anything. Your lungs aren't providing oxygenation for your blood. Your lungs are literally bypassed. And I've seen people stay on these machines. Probably the longest one I've seen was on an ECMO machine for about 4 months. And that's in the ICU. That's on a ventilator with a trach, where the ventilator is hooked up to. They're on ECMO, which means they have 2 large tubes in their neck and 2 in their groin that is pumping blood and bypassing their lungs, because you look at their lungs on an X-ray and it's complete whiteout. Once you get to that stage, I have seen people come off of ECMO that have been on it for a long time, and they end up going to rehab at a long-term care facility, but they are nowhere near at the point where they are ready to go back to work or do anything that we would think of as normal. They will be going through intensive rehab, cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab, and they will have long-term effects that will stick with them most likely for the rest of their life. Everybody's going to be different as far as how functional they are. There's some people who will be on a ventilator for a couple of days, come off of it, and then they're good a month later. But once you get to the point where you're so sick and you're requiring a ventilator and ECMO, it's going to be a long road to recovery, and it's going to be much longer after your discharge from the hospital. And even then, we've had people who finally get off ECMO, they get off the ventilator, and this is months after they've been in the hospital. They finally go to rehab, and then just because they've been deconditioned so much, and they're debilitated, they've lost weight, they're malnourished, they develop some other complication after they go to rehab, a blood clot, they die from a heart attack, they die from a stroke. So some of those patients with real severe illness are definitely not even out of the woods if they make it out of the hospital. So those individuals, yes, they survived, but the long-term effects and what that does to their life expectancy, and their ability to perform their activities of daily living, is a big question. And unfortunately, I hope that we get some more information and we have some better treatments and we learn some of these long-term complications and how best to manage those. But it's not a good situation if you get that sick, even if you survive, unfortunately.
Can you describe the effects, if any, of these new strains of COVID that we're reading about in England and Africa and probably more? Everything you've said about COVID, does that also apply equally to these new strains?
As far as we know, yes. So there's a couple of new strains. One that was getting in the news that was being reported in the UK, now being reported in New York, Denver, and probably other places since I last refreshed that. Yeah, there you go. And what we think we know so far about those two strains, it's that at least one of them may be more infectious. So it could be easier to transmit it to others if you're actually infected. However, we don't think it's more deadly necessarily. And we don't think that the vaccine will be any less effective against this new strain, or new strains rather. So viruses mutate, and this one will continue to mutate. There'll be new mutations that in the future may be more resistant or render the current vaccine less effective. As of right now, that's not the case, we don't think. The good news is this new strains are not as deadly as far as we know. However, they're more infectious, which means more people will get infected, which means more people will develop severe disease. But as of right now, knowing about these strains would not change our current strategy.
Did you go over where people go to get the vaccine? I know some of our class got the vaccine this weekend. Is there, and I missed the first part. Did you, is there anything you could say quickly that wouldn't, hold up the program?
Oh, no, that's fine. We haven't discussed that yet. So vaccine distribution, they initially, CDC had discussed the phases, and the first phase, 1A1, was targeted at healthcare workers in the inpatient setting. So people that were exposed directly and taking care of COVID-19 patients. And then the next batch of individuals were outpatient physicians and providers, in addition to a 75 plus crowd, particularly focused those at high risk with medical issues and those that are residents of long-term care facilities or nursing homes. As far as where one individual can get the virus or can get the vaccine if they qualify currently, how they're rolling this out in a lot of areas has been very state and local government dependent. So nationally, how they're getting it to certain nursing homes and other care facilities is partnering with local pharmacies, also CVS, Walgreens, to create partnerships to get this vaccine distributed. Some places are going directly through health departments, and some providers, some doctors are becoming vaccination providers, which means they sign up and they become a vaccination center. They get an allotment of vaccine. The best place right now that I would check with if you think you qualify would be your primary doctor to see if they have access to the vaccine. If you have any sort of connection with public health or working in a facility that puts you at risk for exposure, you may move up the ladder. It has been somewhat disjointed. I was notified on Friday. I got an email at 11 a.m. that said, we got an allotment of vaccine. I had no idea it was coming. And they said, give us a list of 20 names of patients you think are the highest risk that you think you need to get it, and give it to us by 1 p.m. so we can get it distributed. And so, we come up with a list, we get it out there, and then they try to contact them and get them in to get vaccinated. It's been very dependent on where you are. I think they are focused in bigger cities on getting it rolled out to healthcare providers because those are the areas with referral and health infrastructure. I know that I'm curious where some of the people here who has anybody already gotten the vaccine? Hello. Hey, who's that on there? Is that
I'm Jane.
Hey Jane, how you doing? Where can you tell the group and tell us where you got it?
For the health department.
You got it through the health department?
Yeah, went to Lentz Health on Charlotte Avenue.
Okay. And did they ask you screening questions about age and medical issues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Very, very well organized.
Good. So if you are, yes, sir. Oh, I think we're muted.
I was given a lead to look at once the surrounding counties from Davidson opened up to 75 plus, I was given a list of health departments sign-up sheets from the State Department of Health.
Mm-hmm.
I screened through all of those and I found one county, Dave Nichols' hometown, Houston County, that was offering them. So I drove an hour and a half to Houston County and got my initial shot this last Monday.
Good. Good.
They were very generous. I, in fact, had an appointment that I had mistook for that day, but in fact was for 2 days later. I walked into the health clinic, and the person, the couple in front of me, who were both 75 plus, had tried to make an appointment online, were not successful, so they just did a walk-in.
Mm-hmm.
They took them and gave them shots. They took me, even though my name was not on their list, but I had the reservation that neither of us noticed was for 2 days later. I have a neighbor who also went to that county, and she did have an appointment and was able to get it fairly easily, no problem. It was crowded. They were running out of vaccine, and said, we hope we have enough to serve the people who are currently in the waiting room, and they did. So it was, again, it's county, it appears to be county by county, but the state Department of Health is now beefing up their website to say you can register for, and I was able to get my follow-up appointment for the 1st of February. And so I have an appointment, but this one is now at Fall State in Sumner County. So I would suggest people look at the state website, the State Department of Health website, where there are, for the next month and a half, there are appointments available in any given county. And if you can't find one close by, you can go to a neighboring county.
Paul, I had 3 friends who got the vaccine in Dixon last week. And there were at least 5 others I know that had appointments in Ashland City. I'll know tomorrow because I'm on a meeting with them if they were vaccinated. But as Bob's alluding to, I believe there's a rollout of a new plan by the state next week. And so I don't know if, I don't know how that's going to change things, but anyway.
And it may, it's been a little bit, hindered with supply, distribution. The Pfizer vaccine has to be transported and kept at ultra cold storage, so a -70 fridge, a -70 freezer. The Moderna vaccine can be kept in a regular freezer, which is why you may see the Moderna vaccine distributed to certain areas that may not have the capability to have a deep freezer like that. So we may get Pfizer in more of the metro areas, and you may see the Moderna vaccine transported to areas, certain outlying nursing homes, other health departments that don't have a deep freezer capability. So it's definitely been hindered, so to speak, based on some of those limitations, and then just regular manufacturing issues. So I would continue to look at the Tennessee State Department of Health website. I would continue to check with your primary care doctors. Some people that, if anybody here is a resident of an assisted living facility or has family that are members of an assisted living facility, they may have access to it through their administration. So I would continue to check all those resources. And as far as those day-by-day updates, I'm probably privy to that information as much as you are, just through the internet and access to some of these sites. I don't even know when I'm going to be able to give it personally at my clinic.
Okay. I have a question about effectiveness of the vaccines. Is there a difference with age? I mean, are they less effective in the older age group?
So a lot of people were upset because they were sending the Moderna vaccine to more nursing homes and the Pfizer vaccine to more metro areas and hospitals. And it was mainly because of that reason that the Pfizer vaccine needed a deep freezer, and some of these outlying nursing homes didn't have it. Now, some of the initial data that was suggested in the phase 3 trial for Moderna versus Pfizer is that the Pfizer vaccine might be more effective at producing an immune response in older individuals, the 65, 75, 85 group, than the Moderna vaccine. So that upset some people, saying, well, why are you sending the Moderna vaccine, which may be less effective in older individuals, to nursing homes, and the Pfizer vaccine to hospitals? Again, mostly because of the transport issue and the fact that it needs to be kept in cold storage. However, looking at that data, even if you had an option between either of those two vaccines, I would still recommend getting either one if you have a chance to get it. I wouldn't wait on the Pfizer vaccine if you're older in hopes of getting the Moderna vaccine. Again, we may learn more down the road once we get more people vaccinated and we get some real world numbers on this. But right now, if you have the opportunity to get either one, I wouldn't let age or any other factor be a consideration. They're both effective. They're both equally safe. We may find some populations and some subgroups down the line that we should use one product over the other. But as of right now, not enough data to say I would recommend either one over the other one.
Paul, a couple of questions.
Sure.
A little related. There was one about, you get to first vaccination. What if the second one needs to be, say that first one was Pfizer, can the second one be Moderna if Pfizer is available, or vice versa? The second question that related to it is, where are we in trying to extend the number of vaccines that are out there by only doing one shot instead of the two? And seemed to me that was not advisable, but that's a layperson. Okay.
Sure. So right now we cannot mix products. We're not recommending we do that. CDC on their website is saying that they do not recommend mixing products at this time. They're very similar. They're different ingredients. Could they have a different immune response? It's possible. But right now we're not recommending mixing those vaccines. They are doing some studies to look at mixing those products if needed out of necessity, but right now we're not recommending we do that. Now, let's say you get one shot and then for whatever reason it needs to be delayed. You may have heard about some people proposing, in order to get more vaccine to more people, what if we just give everybody one shot? It gives people partial protection as opposed to giving some people two shots for more maximum protection. Potentially, that could be a strategy. I think that, obviously you're not going to get as good of protection based on the Pfizer trial. After one shot at approximately 3 weeks, which was the interval that they studied, they estimated about 50 to 60% protection at that point. So that's not bad. That's pretty good. It's definitely not 95%. But if you were able to vaccinate a few million more people with 50 to 60% protection, as opposed to half that number with 95%, what would that look like? Would that prevent more deaths? Would you still have the same number of less severe illness? Maybe, but then you're getting into a calculation of what's going to benefit society more, and that's a real tough call. If we come down to it and we say, look, we're not going to have enough supply to give everybody a 2-shot series, we may have to end up rationing like that. Right now, we should still push for 2 shots for everybody. I would love to just ramp up production, increase funding, whatever we have to do. We're getting into kind of logistical manufacturing and government decisions that I'm probably not an expert on. But in terms of the effectiveness of the virus, of the vaccine, one shot of the Pfizer vaccine probably gives you 50 to 60% protection. And there's a minimum interval between getting the first and the second dose. That minimum interval is about 4 days, give or take, from the recommended 21-day interval. So the earliest you could get your second Pfizer shot should be 17 days from the first one. They just say 21 days because that's what they studied. There's nothing magic about 21. That's just the number that they studied. And so they have this data, and that's what they're recommending. But you could probably get it for a long time after that 21-day period. There's no maximum period as far as we know. You should still have that added protection with one shot, and you could get, theoretically, your second shot anytime down the road. And it would still be just as effective after you got that second shot, and you would still have the same amount of protection, theoretically. We'll see what it looks like in the future once we get enough people vaccinated. But there's a minimum interval between the first and second shot, but there's not a maximum interval. So even if we did approach a strategy of just giving everybody one shot, people could still play catch up down the road and get their second shot when it's available. The question is, from a public health standpoint, is that the right thing to do? Maybe, but right now I would love to see everybody get their 2 shots that can get it. And if you have the opportunity, go for it. That might change at a state and federal level down the road, but I have a feeling it'll be more of a manufacturing and logistics issue than a health recommendation issue.
I had a question, but could I defer to Mr. Ferris?
My question was to Jane. How did she get registered at the Lentz Health Center to get the vaccine shot? You're muted.
I went on to the Davidson County Health Department, to their website, not an email, but to their web page, and search on there until you come up with this. I do know that Lentz is booked through the month of January. They're booking now for the month of February.
Thank you.
Paul?
Yes, sir.
This is James Vernon.
Hey.
How safe would it be once we're vaccinated to be around our grandchildren?
About 95% safe.
So children are still considered not to be as much of a carrier as adults?
I think most of the cases in kids, they probably got it from an adult.
Okay.
Most likely. Could you still get the virus from kids? Absolutely. We know they can transmit the virus. We know that. We know it's not as severe. We hear terrible cases about terrible outcomes with certain children that have developed really severe disease, but you hear about them a lot because they're pretty rare and it's kids, so it's going to get a lot more attention. But with you being vaccinated,
Be pretty safe.
I would say, I could say pretty safe. I believe in the efficacy of the vaccine. And once you're fully vaccinated, and by fully vaccinated, what we're saying is 14 days from your second shot.
At what age do they start? What is it recommended to start using the vaccine? I think it's 16.
16. So it depends on which one. So 16 for Pfizer and 18 for Moderna. There are other, or maybe reverse. There are other trials right now that are looking at kids under 12, but we don't have that data right now. And right now we're not recommending it for kids. if there was a big if there was a big reason to give it to kids, such as they were having more severe disease than the elderly or the people with medical issues, we would be focused on them, and we would probably not be waiting for studies and other data if we've already proven it's safe. But based on the numbers, kids, especially really young kids, we're talking the 2 to 10-year-old range, we just don't see that severe of illness in that age range. We think.
Okay, are children likely to be transmitters though? If a child, say a 7-year-old, is exposed to it, and then he visited his grandparents.
Right. So we don't know how much more infectious they would be than another individual, but they can definitely still transmit it. However, if you're vaccinated and you're fully vaccinated, you've gone the 2-week period after that second shot, you have a 5% chance of still catching it. But even if you catch it, there's an even lower chance that you'll develop a real severe infection from it. So I would say that if you're fully vaccinated, at that point, I wouldn't start testing my luck and go out in big crowds, but until we get more people vaccinated. But, once we're all vaccinated, I'm vaccinated fully, Suzanne is vaccinated fully, I will definitely feel a lot better about seeing my parents when they're in town.
Right.
Ann and Larry, I just, I can't stay away from them. So we just take that risk. No, but we've been, we stay careful even when we're in the middle of getting vaccines, when we've gone over and visited Ann and Larry, we've still had our masks on. I've gotten my second shot now. Suzanne's gotten her second shot. I'll feel a lot more comfortable, and the risk will be drastically reduced. We can never get the risk to zero, but we want to get the risk down enough to where we can go about what we would call pre-COVID, what we would call normal. That's the goal.
Okay, thanks.
Sure thing.
I have a question about, clearly it may be a few weeks for those of us who are not over 75. It may be a while before we can get the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if one person in the household gets it, or both of us, what are the criteria you look for? Let's say we're not so sick we have to go to the hospital. What criteria do you look for to know when to seek monoclonal antibodies, or when are they appropriate, or is there a time they're not appropriate? Could you talk about those?
Sure. So monoclonal. Oh,
I was just going to say, I can't pronounce the words, so that's why I say monoclonal. I can't pronounce the medicines, but.
Bamlanivimab.
There you go.
Bamalama. So, Bamlanivimab, and then there's another combination treatment. We're not even using it in our hospital right now. We had a meeting with our pharmacy and therapeutics committee. Mostly the big reason why we didn't focus on using it is because based on preliminary data, it's probably not going to have much of an effect after you get sick enough to get in the hospital. The study with Regeneron, they looked at a small case series of patients, and they were treated outpatient. So they treated individuals that were high risk for progression to severe disease. So these are 65 plus patients with diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, chronic lung disease, cancer histories, etc. These patients were enrolled, and what they found was that 3% of those patients who received the monoclonal antibody treatment developed severe infection and had to be hospitalized. 10% of the patients who didn't and got placebo were hospitalized. So it was a 7% relative reduction. There's not enough data right now to recommend that treatment one way or the other. And one thing I would keep in mind about receiving that treatment is that if you do get a monoclonal antibody treatment or you receive a convalescent plasma therapy, which is kind of similar to a monoclonal antibody treatment, although we're not using it as much, we are recommending that you not get vaccinated for at least 90 days after you get that. Okay, because it could interfere with the effectiveness of the vaccine. Whereas if you just got infected with COVID and then you got over it 10 days later, you could go ahead and get the vaccine. That being said, I think it would be relatively safe to get one of these monoclonal antibody treatments. The only place that I know of within the HCA system, which is over TriStar, I work at Centennial. The only place I know locally at one of these hospitals that you could readily get it would be at Southern Hills Medical Center, and I believe they're doing that inpatient. Another location would be Vanderbilt. But as far as I know, that is only being used under a clinical trial circumstance. Maybe somebody with more Vanderbilt connections could correct me on that if that's wrong. But some outpatient areas may be sites that are giving the monoclonal antibody treatment. But since it has a emergency use authorization by the FDA, you don't necessarily have to be a special site to get it. So your physician at Vanderbilt could potentially request it. Your physician at one of the other outlying hospitals could request it, or even your primary doctor could request it. But as of right now, I'm not involved in using that therapy. And clinical trials are ongoing. So CDC does not recommend it one way or the other.
I was wondering if, well, and this may be a question more for Larry and than for you, but in terms of the questions about the longer term effects of the medicines that have the Moderna, in this case, the effectiveness and what are the potentials of how long is the immunity going to last? Those kind of questions. Is that study continuing, or is the Moderna study at Vanderbilt been terminated?
So, Larry, go ahead.
Well, the Moderna study at Vanderbilt that I'm participating in that trial, it is continuing. And it goes on for 25 months from its start date, which started in August. So at different intervals, I report in and they take a blood sample to check for antibodies and such. And the first interval was a month, and then it was at 3 months, and now it's at 6 months. My next appointment is in March, and then it goes on from there. They have modified the participants in the study who received placebo instead of vaccine have been given an opportunity to come in and have a discussion, and if they choose, they can become what we call unblinded. Right now, nobody, including myself, knows for sure whether they got the vaccine or not until they go and ask that question. And if you're then become unblinded, they tell you, well, you didn't get vaccine, you got placebo. They've now offered those people an opportunity to get vaccine and not continue in the study. But the study is going on for a 2-year period of time, basically to test for how long the immunity, the antibodies that we hope provide immunity, how long that lasts. And I don't know the results of my own antibodies at this point in time. None of that information is shared with the volunteers at this point, but it's all being recorded and reported by the primary investigators of the trial.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If we're finished with that one, is having enough vaccine to take care of everyone, is it just a money issue? I mean, if we had several more Dolly Partons to donate millions of dollars, could we all have vaccine quicker? Not that I have any suggestions for someone to do that, but
Well, money always helps. Money always helps. It's the technology to produce it quicker. It's the chemicals to make the vaccine. Money is definitely always tied into all of that. It's supply of the ingredients. Distribution is a big challenge. Distribution in terms of transporting the vaccine. There's already reports of vaccine being held up in warehouses just due to logistical and transport reasons. There may be vaccine that's sitting there that's not being transported for whatever reason that may actually expire before it gets to where it needs to go. So, you know, it's difficult to comment on some of the issues with transport and getting it to certain areas. I think it's definitely easier to get to some of these larger metro areas and get it to hospitals that have the storage capability. But, you know, if we kept going at the current pace of distribution and production and distribution, it may take a long time, and by a long time, definitely over a year, maybe years, to vaccinate everybody. So my hope is that we begin to ramp up production. We fix some of these distribution and logistical issues. I think we'll get better at it as we kind of get in the flow of things. But that's kind of where we are right now. So we need probably 70 to 90%, at least 70% of the population vaccinated before we could get back to what we thought of as normal in 2019. So if we want to get 70% vaccinated, we first got to have the supply and we got to have the infrastructure to do it. And then we got to convince at least 70% of Americans to get the vaccine. In New York, a third of healthcare workers that were offered the vaccine declined it. I'm sure that concerns on safety and the fact that it's new and people say, well, this seemed rushed. And those are all valid concerns. But all I can do is educate, you know, my patients and people I come in contact with. You know, we know how these studies are conducted. If you believe the science, you believe the methodology with which they did the study, and I do. I strongly encourage everybody who has an opportunity to get it, to get it. It's safe and it's effective. We're going to find out things about the vaccine down the line, and we're going to learn things about it. That happens with every single medicine or vaccine that we get that's new on the market. We find things out after it's been released to the public, and the only way we can do that is get it to the public. But I think right now, my hope is that once people start to see more people get the vaccine and they do okay with it, some of that trust will be earned around the science and around providers, physicians, and other in healthcare to take the recommendation to get the vaccine. And then once we have that, if we can get the logistics in line to make it happen, then I believe we can get there. But it's still going to take a lot of work, which means right now we still have to do everything we have been doing for the past year. Mask, social distancing, avoid big groups, wash your hands all the time. So that's what we got to look forward to. And, you know, we'll get there. The timeline, I don't know.
Oh, I came late, but, and I apologize. But my question is, what kind of, how many adverse reactions are being reported to the vaccine?
Yeah, so me and my wife Suzanne, we both had a sore arm and we both had a headache.
Mhm.
That was mostly it. The headache was pretty mild, and sore arm. I think everybody I've talked to has had a sore arm, so that's
Yeah,
that's
well,
that's
that's
kind of
not
part of it,
unusual.
right? So
Good.
So you know, if you
Oh,
have
that's the
symptoms,
regular flu vaccine.
You're gonna have to say it, Larry.
Are you muted?
Al's
What?
not
Are you
muted.
muted?
Mute him.
I wasn't, excuse me, I wasn't muted because I had a question.
Oh,
That's,
okay.
I'll wait. I want to wait. If I can be very last, that would be fine with me. It's a question about something that Paul said in his introduction and not really about COVID.
okay. And so,
Okay. Yeah.
I'll get back to Grace's question about adverse reactions. You know, most people are going to have a sore arm. Maybe 15% will have pretty moderate symptoms. Moderate symptoms being headache, chills, fatigue, you know, feeling kind of achy, sort of like you have a mild case of the flu. Many people will not have any reaction whatsoever. We've had reports of very serious allergic reactions that can be life-threatening. Again, those are rare, very rare so far, but they have been reported. What do you do, or how do we mitigate a severe reaction? Right now, at least where I've been vaccinated, we have to wait 15 minutes after we get the vaccine at that location in case we have an immediate type allergic reaction to it. And 15 minutes should be enough if you're going to develop a life-threatening reaction. Now, does having a prior allergy or side effect to another vaccine mean you can't get this vaccine? No, and there's the dog right now, perfect timing. So, thanks, Suzanne. Okay, she's got the dog. Sorry, folks. This is our modern life. So, as far as if, let's say let me just touch on adverse reactions and allergies to other vaccines. The only reason you should not get this vaccine is if you have had a severe allergic reaction to any of the ingredients in the vaccine. You shouldn't have an allergic reaction to mRNA, that genetic material, but there's certain other chemicals like polyethylene glycol that's within these vaccines, and you can look at the ingredients on there. Most of them are things you can't even really pronounce, and it would be difficult to say whether or not you would have a reaction to those, because I'm looking at them and I don't ever remember diagnosing someone with a polyethylene glycol allergy. But that being said, you know, there's no egg products, there's no yeast products, there's no latex products in these vaccines. Some people have those allergies and they make up certain other vaccines that we have, but none of those ingredients are within this vaccine. So if you look at the specific ingredients of this vaccine, and it's not too long, you can find it on the CDC website. That is the only reason I would say don't get the vaccine is if you've had an allergic reaction to one of those components. But even a history of a severe reaction to another vaccine should not mean that you can't get this vaccine.
Paul,
Go ahead.
somebody else wants to come on, but before we do, we'll take one or two more questions and then let Al ask his before we wrap up. But to everybody on the call, last Friday, I sent an email to Encountering Aging Stages class that had both the local website and phone number for Lentz Health Department, and also information from the state that included some additional information for Metro. If anybody either can't find that on their or did not get that, just email me and I'll send that information to you. That gives you the phone numbers and websites to go and check about availability of vaccinations. As Jane Hedrick shared earlier, Metro they're doing the shots on Saturday and Sunday, and they are booked through the end of January. And the word is that when they know how many more vaccines they will have after January 31, they will start. You can go ahead and get on a waiting list, and they will notify you when they're available. If you're over 75 right now, they'll let us know when the next 65 plus goes on.
I thought Judy Williams got hers in the morning.
She's already had.
Paul, there was some discussion last week about splitting a dosage in half and giving half to one person and half to another.
Right.
Is that effective?
Giving giving some people just one shot, and then so you can
No, just giving, let's say a shot's 10 cents.
You're saying give
Split the
give less
dosage
of
in
a-
half, yeah.
giving less of a dose basically with that first one. Yeah, potentially, but as far as how effective that would be, I'm sure it would give you some protection. I'm sure it would be less than 50% than the full dose would. But I don't know those numbers, and I'm not sure if those are published.
What I heard,
Yes,
excuse
ma'am.
me, was that they were thinking about this for younger people,
They
not us old birds.
right. As far as the dosages for children and what they're doing, again, those trials are ongoing, but right now we just don't have a recommendation to recommend giving a lower dose to an adult. And I don't know of any plans as of right now to do that in terms of helping the distribution. I've heard about giving just one dose, but about splitting the dose, I haven't. I think in children they may, but again, those studies are ongoing.
I had a question about women who are pregnant or potentially pregnant. Are you recommending your patients or your clients, patients who are in that situation, to go ahead and get the vaccination? There seemed to be some question in some of the news reports about whether or not that was safe, and that was the reason some of the healthcare workers were deferring their chance to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I 100% would recommend it to either pregnant, could be pregnant, trying to get pregnant, or lactating women. There was some circulation going around. It was even going around with a lot of our nurses and other providers. People were saying, don't get the vaccine if you want to get pregnant because it could cause infertility. That's not really based in anything that's concrete, or that there's any evidence for that. Suzanne's looking at me right now, and she looks like she wants to say something, so I'm going to let her do it.
Hi guys, I'm Paul's wife and Calvary member, and I'm an OBGYN. And the guidance about pregnant, wanting to be pregnant, and currently lactating people, there are studies underway right now. We should have more data in about 3 months. But our American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology has encouraged all pregnant and breastfeeding and soon to be pregnant healthcare workers who have access to the vaccine to go ahead and take it. Because the effects we've seen on these women who get severe COVID is devastating. And so we think the risk, the theoretical risk of the vaccine is less than the risk of actually catching COVID. So we're giving it to healthcare workers who are pregnant. We'll see what their results are in a couple months, and we should have that data pretty fast.
Thanks, Hun. So
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm recommending it because we do know one thing we do know, and I've taken care of some of these patients, and I know Suzanne has, are pregnant females, which are going to be younger, are more at risk to have severe disease and severe outcomes. So we think that any risk posed by the vaccine would be far less than what would be posed by actually getting COVID-19 if you're pregnant.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you for this time, how much time you've given and so forth. And everybody else for joining us. This was, we got this together in what, less than a week? And it's just so helpful. It helps to answer so many questions, and there are bound to be others. But we'll close tonight with Al's non-COVID related comment or question.
And thank you.
That's probably not even fair for me to say that. I'm sorry. When you were educating us, you were talking about the covering or the spikes.
Oh, yeah.
On that virus are actually proteins.
Right.
And that the vaccine is going to interact with protein. And you said in your introduction also, I think that there are some other uses or other things going on with that process that, and I was kind of curious if you could or cared to remark as to maybe a couple of other things that they're doing. And in particular, is there any possibility that could be for cancer?
Yeah, they've been looking at it for cancer for a decade. So this mRNA technology or this genetic material, where basically you give your body the material to produce some kind of product, whether it's a protein or whatever. And the goal is your body produces that protein, and that protein carries out some purpose. That protein could be something that goes and attaches to another cell that helps fight cancer cells. That protein could be allowed to produce antibodies or cause your body to produce antibodies to fight different infections. That mRNA technology, as far as treatments for cancers and things like that, not being an oncologist, I couldn't give you a very intelligent answer on some of the other treatments. I do know the technology is not new, though. It's been around for about a decade. As far as you mentioned the spike proteins and some of these other things, mRNA is not the only technology that is being used for the upcoming vaccines. There's other products that are being used as well. I see was that a hand there?
Oh, it was me scratching my face.
Was that okay. So some of the other vaccines that are coming up from Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, some of them actually just put a piece of the protein directly into the body. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is using another type of virus, an adenovirus, which is another virus that circulates seasonally, and pretty much anybody can get it. It can cause a mild disease from upper respiratory infections, GI illness. They take an inactivated version of that vaccine, attach a piece of the spike protein to it. That goes in, your cells are presented that information, and you create antibodies or defenses against the protein that's introduced, which is on the surface of the virus. So there are different technologies that are being used for COVID-19, different vaccine technologies. mRNA is just one of them and the newest. I'm not aware of any other specific on the market products or drugs that use mRNA technology exclusively. There may be some oncologic trials, some cancer trials that are, but I'm not aware of those studies, and not saying they're not out there. I'm just not aware of it in terms of I'm not in the oncology field, so I'm not privy to some of that, but I know it's been looked at for several years.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. And I just want to say, I think we'll probably be stuck with the present schedule of manufacturing because it will be impossible to find several other Dolly Partons.
Thank Dolly of Nashville. That's her title.
Yes. Again, thank you, Paul, and thank everybody for joining us. Have a blessed week, safe week, and healthy week.
Wear your mask.
Wear your mask.
Yes, wear your mask.
Right.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's been
Appreciate
very
the opportunity.
informative. Thank you. Thank you, Vin.
If y'all have any questions, you can get a hold of me, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Who was that? Who was that?
Which one?
That was standing up?
Van,
Yes.
I
That's
was
right.
late. I need a shot for memory.
I don't know
Also,
that.
along with COVID, yeah. So thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Okay.
Well, you can send her the
I can
recording.
send you the recording.
Oh, good. I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you.